Welcome to Europe Debates. I'm Richard Milsom, the Executive Director of the European Conservatives and Reform Party in Brussels. And today we are greatly honoured to be joined by a stellar panel of leading politicians and experts from both sides of the Atlantic in order to discuss the future of agriculture, food security and trade. If we learnt one thing from the coronavirus, it was that international trade helped to keep our supermarket shelves stocked and food on our tables. However, that does not mean they will always operate without issue. And so we must also consider the future of food security. Growing enough food is a considerable challenge. It's our most fundamental human resource. And how we meet that challenge whilst also reducing our environmental footprint and greenhouse gas emissions is one of the greatest challenges of our day. Citizens across Europe want choice, both in the variety of food that they consume and the comfort of knowing that it was grown locally or imported from a reliable partner. Largely drafted before the coronavirus outbreak, the EU's recently announced Farm to Fork strategy promises to answer these questions. Aimed to be at the heart of the European Green Deal, this ambitious programme envisions a comprehensive overhaul of European farming that, it believes, will make European food production more resilient and affordable, while simultaneously advancing the EU's broader climate change, biodiversity and sustainability goals. During this webinar, we will present the transatlantic perspective on food security and the direction of regulation on both sides of the pond. How significant is the EU-US divide on these issues? And where can we find common ground? How will Farm to Fork affect the chances for a US-EU trade agreement, given the already significant tensions over agriculture? And what to do what do the other EU trading partners think? Inside the EU, who will bear the costs involved, and how can we assure equity, given the vast regional disparities across the EU? How will Farm to Fork impact the global competitiveness of European farmers? And also, how does growing political opposition to the EU's agreements with Latin America and Canada signal a reassessment of its broader trade strategy? Now, this webinar is live streamed across multiple social media platforms, including YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and on our website. We're very grateful for the hundreds, thousands of people who have registered, and will now be following this debate live. Please do use the comment sections to ask questions, which I will try to relay to the panel if time allows. So now, let's get it started. And firstly, we are greatly honoured to be joined by Secretary Sonny Perdue. Sonny Perdue is currently serving as the 31st United States Secretary of Agriculture. He was appointed to the position by President Donald Trump following his election in 2016. And before being appointed as Secretary of Agriculture, he served 2 terms as Governor of Georgia from 2003 to 2011. Secretary Perdue, you are rightly regarded as one of the best agricultural secretaries the US has ever had, with a strong record of achievement at both the state and federal level, supporting US farmers and ensuring their prosperity. Perhaps to kick us off, and for our European audience, could you outline the key policies and programs that you and the Trump administrations have been carrying out over the last 4 years? And what challenges and opportunities do you see for the next 4 years in US food production? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Richard, and flattery will get you everywhere. So I'm happy to join you, and I appreciate the invitation to join you and your audience this morning, which morning for us and afternoon for you all, which seems to have grown exponentially. But I appreciate our host making this virtual event a reality. While I prefer face-to-face, as we all do, it's also important to be able to continue to communicate as we work together. It's good to be talking again with Commissioner Wojciechowski again, and I appreciate the opportunity to engage with you, sir, and with others across the EU and actually across the world here this morning about how we can work together to ensure agriculture around the world is sustainable and affordable and available in the future. We know that I guess the pandemic has certainly helped us to realize that farmers and food processors around the world, both Europe and the US, are facing some 2 overarching challenges. First of all, as you indicated, Richard, not enough food is a zero tolerance issue. Food is vital for all of us, and to produce enough food and agricultural products to meet the needs of growing populations and rising standards of living that expect more and better food availability. Secondly, and just as importantly, to protect the natural resource base on which agriculture depends for both current and future production. One of our primary duties as leaders in agriculture is to assist our country's farmers and ranchers and food producers in meeting those challenges sustainably. And Richard, you've done a good job leading out with the challenges that we have before us and differences of opinion. I know that I share this goal with all of you, even if we don't agree on how to achieve it best. I know how difficult it is to balance the environmental and the economic and the social of sustainability. The reality of 2020 is farmers need to be profitable and food needs to be affordable in order to have any sustainability measures to be worthwhile. In the U.S., I'm proud to say that we're achieving profitability, affordability, and sustainability all at the same time, and I firmly believe that those three are never mutually exclusive. Environmental sustainability obviously is critical if we're going to maintain the health of our soil, our water, and air while meeting food and fiber demand. The only way we're going to feed the world while minimizing agriculture's impact on the environment is by producing more with less total inputs. Social sustainability also needs to be a priority. By increasing productivity and efficiency, we contribute to food security by improving the accessibility and the affordability of food for some of our less fortunate citizens in the globe. Improving environmental and economic sustainability is all fine and good, but only if consumers can afford to put affordable, safe, high-quality food on the table. Finally, economic sustainability is equally as important as all the others. Farming needs to be profitable for it to continue. We see that as we see farms going out of business and fewer people farming for it, and as well as to entice younger farmers to the profession. We know the demographics about aging farmers all over the world and what it takes to grow food and fiber. Increasing productivity, I believe, is one of the only ways to ensure decent livelihoods for farmers and farm workers. To meet all three of these sustainability objectives of the U.S., we've taken an innovation-based approach. This year, USDA launched the Ag Innovation Agenda. The AIA is designed to stimulate innovation in order to increase U.S. agricultural production by 40%, while cutting the environmental footprint of U.S. agriculture in half by 2050. Over the past 70 years, U.S. output has almost tripled, while inputs have only increased by 0.1% annually. We're achieving this dramatic increase in productivity with fewer resources by harvesting innovation and technology and continuing to put those forward. We commend the EU's commitment to sustainability, and we desire to work with you towards sustainability, feeding a population of nearly 10 billion people by 2050. We have no other choice because food is vital. But we will not be on track to meet our food needs if we continue to impose policies that restrict growth and stifle innovation. We're worried that, as proposed, the farm to fork and biodiversity strategies will be extremely trade prohibitive and jeopardize agricultural output. If I'm an EU farmer, honestly, I'm very concerned by this strategy and the policies that will follow. When innovative tools are taken away from a farmer, the only choice is protectionism, which isn't healthy for Europe or United States or anywhere around the world. The walled-off protectionist mentality will only take us backward, not forward. You cannot take away the tools. Your farmers have to compete in the global economy. Without them, they will not be able to succeed. With this strategy, it appears that Europe has forgotten to farm in farm to fork. For any approach to be successful, it's not only enough to look at environmental sustainability alone, we must consider also social and economic sustainability. Food security cannot be assured if policies jeopardize the economic viability of the very farms that give us our food. All three pillars, economic, social, and environmental sustainability, are equally important if we are to meet our sustainability goals. In conclusion, it's important that we as global leaders move forward with policies to protect the environment and enhance food security and nutrition, and our policy formulation be transparent, data-driven, and science-based. This is what it will take to solve the challenges, Richard, that you laid out ahead of us. I look forward to today's conversation and I look forward to our future efforts and collaboration to expand our trade relationships, feed the world, and meet this central challenge of our time. Thank you very much.
Well, Secretary, thank you very much for that and for putting the situation so eloquently across to our viewers. I wonder if I might ask you one short question, there's this widely held belief within the European public that the US is considered inferior when it comes to food safety and the environment. Now, do you believe that the EU's feeling of superiority on these issues is justified? I mean, I'm thinking of the chlorine chicken issue, but also surely that any potential trade deal would be so much easier to achieve if we could have mutual recognition of each other's standards.
Well, Richard, I would submit to you that we host millions of your visitors from Europe, all across Europe every year. They come and eat our food here, and they come back just as healthy as they were when they left. I think that's prima facie evidence of the safety and the healthiness and nutrition of our food supply. Certainly, absolutely not, I don't agree, and I'm very, really chagrined at the fact that the European press and others would denigrate the American food supply. Honestly, the record reflects that our evidence of salmonella and E. coli and those is really less than we see around the world. We've got as well food. Our food's also affordable. We give consumers a choice. We've got organic growers here. We've got growers in different. We've got really people who don't want protein. They want plant-based protein. The real essence in this whole issue is choice. Give the consumer the choice and let them vote with their pocketbooks. They know best what's best for them and their families, and that's what we do here in the U.S.
Thank you so much for that. It was a question that was raised by many people. Certainly I've been, and the panel have been to the US many times, eaten extremely well American produce, never had any problems. Thank you, Secretary. And thank you for sharing your time with us today. And we will return to you on a couple of those issues later. Now we move to the European Commissioner for Agriculture, Janusz Wojciechowski. Commissioner Wojciechowski replaced Phil Hogan in 2019 at the European Commission, and previously was a member of the European Court of Auditors and a Polish member of the European Parliament from 2004 to 2016. Commissioner Wojciechowski, I had the great privilege to work with you between 2010 and 2016 during your tenure as a member of the European Parliament. And your political allies in the European Conservative and Reformist family, thank you very much for participating in this debate today and fully support all the work you do at the European Commission. I wondered if I could pose the question to you. Your role is to deliver the EU's farm to fork strategy within the new Green Deal. Can you explain, particularly for our American followers, the current situation, but also explain the challenges and costs ahead for EU farmers through the implementation period of this new legislation, and also how farm to fork can keep the EU agricultural sector globally competitive and at the forefront of innovation?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Is okay? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for giving me opportunity to participate into this very interesting and very important debate. Good afternoon for all participants. Good morning for participants from America, and especially for Mr. Secretary Perdue. I remember very well our meeting half year ago, and end of January, in different circumstances just before the attack of the COVID-19 and before the crisis. Now we have a new situation. The European agriculture has passed the test in the crisis. We have had and still have a dramatic public health situation in Europe. We have a huge economic crisis due to economic constraints, but we have not had, unfortunately, do not have a food supply crisis. Through the crisis from February until now, food supplies in the European Union were uninterrupted, and there was no shortage of food. We owe it to our farmers, we owe it to entrepreneurs and employees of the processing sector and the food distribution sector. We also have the right to say that maintaining of food security, this is the great, in this great crisis, is a success of the EU Common Agricultural Policy. Food security has been maintained, but agriculture itself has been affected by this crisis. The border blockage associated with the pandemic has caused difficulties in cross-border transport of food and agricultural products. The fruit, vegetables, and milk sectors have felt this strongly. In their case, rapid transport is of crucial importance for the market. Some sectors have been severely affected by the lack of seasonal workers. The Commission intervened urgently, among others, by issuing guidelines on green border corridors for food, agricultural goods, and live animal transport. The Commission also taken decisions to mobilize market intervention measures in a number of markets, including the launch of private storage for dairy and beef producers. This was a major test for the Commission, as never before has it been necessary to intervene so much at once in such a short time. We were not faced with one market crisis, but with many simultaneous crises. But we managed to overcome them. The lesson for the future: this crisis, however, provides us with an important lesson that we need to strengthen our food security. We need to enhance the sovereignty and resilience of European agriculture and the food sector as a whole. We should then analyze food security on 4 levels. First, food security means having food, to ensure the supply of food to our consumer tables. This is the fundamental objective. But to achieve this aim, we must also analyze it at deeper levels. It is not enough to have a food. We have to have as much food as possible from local fields, because it may not be possible to get it those placed farther away. This is why the European Union is introducing a farm-to-fork strategy, which advocates shortening the supply chains and making the journey from field to table simply shorter. Each year we transport more than 3 billion tons of agricultural goods and food around Europe. This produces huge economic costs, which is paid by the farmers receiving less money for their products, from other hand, by consumers paying more for food. Such a large scale transport also comes a huge cost to the environment, to the climate, and produces greenhouse gases and other emissions which must be reduced. This is why the strategy from farm to fork is focused on reducing transport needs by linking agriculture more closely to local processing and local markets. This does not imply any new trade barriers, but the creation of some preference for agriculture supplying to the local market. Food security obviously requires land capable of producing food. A land capable of producing food is not only today, but also tomorrow for future generations. We cannot destroy this land. We cannot exploit it. In 2000, Pope John Paul II said to Italian farmers that a human being cannot give in to the temptation of profit at all costs at the expense of the nature, because sooner or later the nature will rebel against him. We already have signs of such a rebellion, even permanent drought, which are not only the results of climatic phenomena, but also results from over-exploitation of agricultural land. This is why the European Union is opting for sustainable, environmentally friendly farming, and this is the Green Deal with its farm to fork and biodiversity strategies are for. With the help of EU funds, we will motivate farmers to adopt sustainable production methods, to develop organic farming, to reduce the use of fertilizers, pesticides, to less intensive livestock farming, to reduce the amount of antibiotics in the farm, etc. However, the most important for food security are farmers. The land itself, even the best, will not yield if there are not enough farmers who want and can work on this land. We have fewer and fewer farmers in Europe. Over the decade, the number of farms has decreased from 14 to 10 million, with around 1,000 farms disappearing every day, mostly small family farms. The number of young farmers is decreasing. Young people do not want to be farmers because it is difficult and economically very risky profession. In agriculture, you can do everything you can and lose everything because of natural disaster or market crisis. We want to strengthen the economic security of farmers in the EU. The reform Common Agricultural Policy foresees strengthened intervention tools, especially crisis management. We also support agrodiversity as a way to strengthen the resilience of farms to crisis situation. If a farmer has several crops on his farm, several types of production, then a crisis in one sector does not take away the basis of his entire existence. We also need to strengthen investment in rural areas so that they do not become depopulated, so that decent living conditions can be found in the countryside, that young people do not run away from the countryside in search of better life. Finally, the lesson from the COVID-19 crisis is that more than ever we have to look after agriculture that provides us with food security. Agriculture needs to be more sustainable and more environmentally and climate friendly, but also the agriculture policy needs to be more sustainable and more friendly for farmers. Thank you.
Commissioner, thank you very much. There's an awful lot to discuss on this issue, and it's very difficult to pack it into the time. None of us underestimate the magnitude of the portfolio that you currently are in charge of, and there's an enormous amount of issues and difficulties ahead within this as well. Before we finish this first section, I'd like to pose the same question to both the Secretary and to the Commissioner. Perhaps we'll start with the Commissioner. But how significant is the EU-US divide on these issues? And where can we find common ground? How will Farm to Fork affect the chances for a US-EU trade agreement in the near future? Perhaps, Commissioner, if you'd like to take that one first.
About the Farm to Fork strategy, this is of course, there is a lot of concerns of the European farmers, because the European farmers are concerned that Farm to Fork, for example, the improvement of the organic farming, more less intensive agricultural practices, the results will be less productivity of European agriculture. Less productivity in European agriculture means more requirement for the import that US farmers can should be not worried about the Green Deal and the strategies. But this is a very important signal that is very important to emphasize especially for the European farmers. No one farmers will be forced to achieve the higher standards, higher requirements. We will encourage the farmers, motivate them for the more sustainable practices, for the better protection of environment, and maybe to create alternatives for the intensive farming. We have the problem in European Union because the part of European agriculture is very similar to the industry now, and it is not good direction of the agriculture. Should be agriculture, not the industry, because there is in the short term then it can be more profitable. But in the long perspective, to destroy to damage the soil, to damage the potential of agriculture for the future. The food security is not for, as I said before, not for today. This is for the next generation. In the farm to fork strategy, in the biodiversity strategy, it was my personal contribution that we should monitor all time the implementation of both strategies and the impact of the strategies for the food security, for the farmers' incomes, for the farmers' competitiveness, because the fair competition is absolutely very important. But this is not against the international trade. We need international trade. We don't need the barriers in the trade. European Union is interested to increase the international trade of food because it's the biggest food producer in the world. But the primary agricultural products, European Union is important, netto important of the primary unprocessed food, the primary agricultural products. This is the reason that we need trade with USA, with other countries. That is very important. That's Green Deal, farm to fork strategy, biodiversity strategy is not against the international trade. This is the I think that there is no controversy we should do together to increase the international trade and also to increase the local market and to create the shorter way from the farm to fork. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Just if we could go back to the Secretary, just quickly, the same question. I am unashamedly a free trading Brit, one of the few remaining in Brussels these days. My country is very interested in doing a trade deal with the US as quickly as possible. You know, we watched obviously the whole TTIP thing unravel. Where's the common ground? How can we do this from the US point of view?
Well, Richard, I hope we can. I think we've already established the fact that United States citizens are eating healthy, nutritious, affordable food based on the productivity that we've gained over the last 70 years based on innovation. Our soil is better, our air is better, and our water quality is better than it was even 50 years ago. So the high productivity has not damaged the environment. As I indicated on our three pillars of sustainability, it takes environmental sustainability certainly for the future. My father told me that our goal is to be good stewards and to leave the land better than we found it. I believe that's what we're doing with a better, more productive output using less environmental issues than we would if we had less there. So I think hopefully if I were a European farmer based on the farm to fork strategies, I would be literally concerned, because if you make me anti-competitive, my only hope is protectionism. That's not going to be good for international trade or anything. We know that actually even now we have a trade deficit with the EU, between the United States and the EU, and certainly that's not even including the $37 billion of automobiles coming from the European Union. So there's a lot of risk. If we start protectionism in agriculture, saying our products are better than yours and yours can't come in because they don't meet our standards, then we're in serious issues then that have an opportunity to metastasize to other sectors and do real damage to the global trade environment. So I hope we don't get there. We need to look at that very carefully. My solution is, let's say, look, I believe Europe should be able to dictate how their farmers farm as much as they want, but let the consumer ultimately decide. That's what we do here in the United States. Let your consumers decide. If they want these products, then they will buy them. If they don't, I can assure you our farmers won't send them. So that's the ultimate solution.
Thank you, Secretary. I could listen to the two of you all day, and I'm sorry we haven't got enough time. We've got to move on the agenda. Thank you, and we'll try and come back later on once we've had a few more views. So now I would like to turn to John Entine, who's a science writer in the US. He's the founder of the Genetic Literacy Program, an advocacy group on scientific literacy and debate. A former network news writer and producer for NBC News and ABC News, John has written numerous books and articles on genetics and chemicals, and we're delighted to have you here today, as I know you have a deep and very technical understanding, far greater than I, of many of these issues. John, you've been deeply engaged in the science behind the EU and US agricultural regulations. Why do you believe that the EU, that it has this fairly unique precautionary system that makes food safer, and its agricultural production friendlier to the environment, particularly the EU's effective ban on GMOs and gene editing and things, and the increasing numbers of pesticides that are being taken off the market in the EU? I mean, in your view, how does the EU precautionary system stack up against the traditional risk-based regulation in the rest of the world? What does the kind of science say on this?
A great question. I do want to start by praising the European community for coming up with this green document plan. I just want to stress that I hope it's a beginning of a conversation and not a set in cement set of ideas. When you drill down into the document, it really raises some very fundamental contradictions between the goals, which are sustainability, biodiversity, and resilience, and the method used to achieve them, which gets back to your question about the precautionary methodology in regulation versus the risk-based one. And I think some of the premises of the precautionary belief is that it leads to a safer food system, and that the reduction in the use of agricultural chemicals is automatically considered an environmentally friendly way. And I think that that's a very suspect idea. And I think I'd like to go back to the Green Deal to illustrate why some of the proposals in it are so problematic and actually will contradict the very goals, I believe, if they're implemented, that you want. For instance, you talk about a reduction in pesticides by a huge amount, 50%. There's almost an implication in there, since you also endorse a 25% increase in organic production, that organic farmers don't use pesticides, when in fact they not only use pesticides, but in many cases use more pesticides that are equally or more carcinogenic than ones used by conventional farmers. Copper sulfate would be one example, which is widely used. And as you probably know, the European Union tiptoed towards banning copper sulfate, which is widely used by particularly the wine industry in Europe. The EFSA was very strongly supportive of restricting it, and yet because of the organic lobby, you backed away from it. So the idea that somehow there's only carcinogenics in US food is just not supported. And I think if you implement the Green New Deal, what you will be doing is adopting a system that is about 40% less yield efficient than what you have in the conventional agriculture in the United States. There are huge sustainability implications for that. Essentially, you have to make up that production. You can't do that by sprinkling organic fairy dust on farms. You have to get more arable land. Where you get that arable land is probably developing countries. It probably means clear-cutting forests. So in essence, Europe, holding up the flag of sustainability, is actually exporting its environmental externalities to the developing world and asking them to pick up the cost of really a goal that is driven more by the affluent mentality of Europe than anything else. And you guys are a huge food exporter, and it's going to fall hard on Africa and other countries. So I don't want to take up more time. There's a range of issues I could talk about, but I think the key fundamental issue is the US has been much more aggressive in embracing biotechnology, not only in transgenics, but on gene editing as well. And Europe has taken, they call it a precautionary view, but the science community in Europe calls it a backward scientific view. And I think unless Europe embraces technology, you're going to have some major problems, and you will not be able to achieve any of the goals, any of the major goals of your Green New Deal. It's time to rethink this kind of ideological, it's not precautionary, it's ideological opposition to the technology that the whole rest of the world has embraced.
Thank you, John. Could I just ask you about something I was reading about recently on this serious threat of mycotoxin contamination? The EU is proposing basically to chop, in fact it started before the Green New Deal, chop the fungicides which can prevent them. Is that not a very real and very serious threat to production in the future?
Oh, extremely serious. Mycotoxins are controlled largely in the US by the use of transgenic crops, which have really essentially eliminated the concern of mycotoxins. It's happened when corn is grown in other countries as well. It's a very, very serious issue, especially in developing countries where Europe exports a lot of its goods to. And essentially you're exporting a health problem, a serious one, that literally damages the brains of children. So again, everyone wants to cut chemical use. As Secretary Perdue said, we've done it in things like insecticide use in the United States. We've cut over 90% of insecticide use since the mid-1990s, almost primarily because the introduction of transgenic BT crops, insecticide-resistant crops, which have been rejected in the EU, but embraced in other countries such as India and Bangladesh. So this is very, very problematic. I think you need to step back, take a real stock about whether your goals make sense, and the demonization of conventional agriculture and the almost mystical raising of organic agriculture, which is very inefficient, creates greenhouse gas releases with over-tillage, and also has a huge greenhouse gas problem with the increased use of cows and cattle, which is the single biggest contributor to greenhouse gas pollution in the world, and that will have to be dramatically increased with a 25% increase in organic farming. These are real issues. So words don't matter, actions really are what we should be focusing on.
Extremely well said. Thank you very much for that, John. Again, it's a massive subject, but we've got to plough on. May I now introduce a Spanish member of the European Parliament, Herman Tertsch. Herman was first elected in 2019 for the Vox party in Spain. Prior to that, he had a successful career as a journalist and a broadcaster working across Europe. And I'd like Herman to bring in the view from the Shires, to bring in the views from the constituents around the European continent. Could you perhaps describe from your own experience and from what you've heard from your constituents some of the greatest challenges presented by Farm to Fork? The European Commission clearly plans to restructure cap payments to mitigate some of the costs associated with its mandates. But will these, in your view, fairly and adequately compensate those regions that are already struggling economically? And how will this impact the cost of food to consumers? What about the farmers' ability to compete in global markets?
Well, Richard, thank you very much. First of all, I want to say it's an honor and a privilege to join this conversation on food security with the most principal leaders in charge of design and implementation of agricultural policies in the US and Europe. We as Europeans and the US have the huge responsibility to feed a growing world population. I think I regret that unfortunately our title has become a little bit inaccurate. We're not in a post-COVID world. We're still very much inside the COVID world, and we'll see how it develops in Europe, in the US, and elsewhere. That's the reason why I think that for the time being, all our efforts now on agriculture should focus on how to secure food supply and how to help farmers dealing with a deep crisis and the risk of economic failure and rural exodus. In Spain, we know very much about that, and in this sense, I would say I'm really concerned that when we hear the expositions from the other side of the Atlantic, just from the Secretary of State, and from the Secretary of Agriculture, and from Mr. Antin, I think I hear very much the opinion of the European farmers as well reproduced far more than in the Commission, in the European Commission, and the Farm to Fork strategy itself. COVID should help us to better understand what really matters, to free ourselves from narrow frames imposed by this ideological constraints in Europe and in the Parliament especially. We suffer so much in the European Parliament. Our pre-COVID strategies and ideas need to be strongly revised in the light of the effects of this pandemic. Farming is an essential sector, and we must find a better balance between food security and the European Union unlimited green ambitions and restrictions. We all know what farmers are doing to provide safe and affordable food to consumers with enormous effort in a context of COVID-19. But We pay them with a farm to fork and biodiversity strategy, where farmers seem to be part of the problem and not part of the solution. And that can't go on further. Furthermore, in the new financial framework, in the new multi-annual financial framework, MFF, we have agreed an important cut in the CAP, in our common agricultural policy budget, in real terms, where Spaniards will suffer especially as well. When we talk to new farmers, we realize that they are really demotivated because of this permanent, unfair, and uninformed criticism from traditional social media, but also because of the attitude of this kind of uncompromising attitude in the European Commission. I see in Europe a deep disconnect between the perception of the urban consumers and the reality of the agricultural producers, a lack of knowledge of agri-innovation, animal welfare, and the sustainable use of pesticides, and other many issues. The big concentrations of population in urban areas understand less and less about agriculture, and there you have all these activist groups, NGOs, combined with ignorance and the leverage in social media to create alarmism, if not absolute hysteria, around things that should not be controversial. And that's one of the main issues, because there we have ideology in a prevalence over science, over common sense, and over trade interests. They use this fear to scaremonger and to propagate panic in poorly informed urban consumers, but that's a political pressure that makes sense for them in the big political parties. And the big political parties are now more or less kidnapped by ideologies that bring these cases and this policy forward. That leads to poor policies to tackle the challenge of food security. In a recent speech by Envy Commissioner Sinkevicius, he underlined that food security cannot be considered a top priority anymore at all. I am sure Agri-Commissioner Wojciechowski has a different view, but there's a lot of work to be done in the College of Commissioners, in the political parties they belong to, and in the mainstream media in Europe to convince them otherwise. As policymakers aware of food security and as a pillar of sustainable development goals, we need to engage in a better public understanding about what farmers are doing and the enormous social, health, and environmental benefits of the daily work, instead of this continuous criminalizing them and putting them as one of the problems and not one of the main tools of the solution we have for the goals we have and our needs.
Thank you very much, Herman.
Yeah.
As ever, you're a great polymath. You're a regular on our debates.
Let me only, Richard, say that there are many things where we have to go to freedom. Freedom is a key word. Choice. We talked. The Secretary of Agriculture spoke about choice. That's absolutely what we need for the biotechnology, for the genome editing, for precision farming, for organic farming, and for the productivity farming. We need choice and we need liberty, and that's one of the problems we always have when we talk with the Commission. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Herman. Right, let me now move on. It's time ticking on to Mrs. Anna Fotyga. Anna is a Polish MEP, former Foreign Minister of Poland, and Chair of the European Parliament Security and Defence Committee. She's also served as the ECR Party Vice President since 2014, and she was recently selected by NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg as a special consultant for NATO's political arm. Anna also has the slightly dubious honour of being my boss, so I shall tread softly. But Anna, you're a great expert in foreign affairs, relations and diplomacy. But in your view, how important is food security as a part of national security?
Yeah, exactly. Actually, there are two terms used during our debate. One is food safety, and another one is food security. They are not exactly the same, or terms meaning exactly the same set of characteristics. Allow me to focus on food security. Therefore, Janusz Lewandowski, during his first presentation, hinted about or described the efforts made by European Commission and EU member states to maintain food security during COVID-19 crisis. I agree with him that generally we passed successfully this test, but actually the real effects of COVID-19 in terms of food security are still to be judged after, and actually they have to be monitored in statu nascendi. Even before Corona crisis, I think that during previous years in my own country, EU member state Poland, there were areas where we had to combat hunger among children, meaning that Poland and generally EU is able to produce a lot of food, actually sufficient amount of food, yet due to economic availability or physical availability, chains of distribution, chains of supply, variety of crises, not everybody is to reach sufficient amount of food. So it happens even in Europe, and not to speak about Africa or other parts of the world. I agree, Secretary Perdue, good to see you and good to listen to you. I'm absolutely sure that US is able to produce more and more excellent quality food using innovation and modern knowledge. Unfortunately, our problem, the international problem, is not amount of food. We do not have the problem of amount of food. I think that produce is enough. We have so many conflicts all over the world where food is not available to people. We still have areas of famine in Africa. We have severe malnutrition, and we have to combat it via a variety of programs. When we speak about this problem and know that EU tries to be, is a global player, has the ambition of being a global player. So we have areas of responsibility where we are close linked to Western Balkan, to our Eastern neighborhood. Both areas are heavily infected by or affected by COVID-19, and we have to check whether there is sufficient provision of food to those areas. In terms of Africa, I had conversation with my dear friend Herman Turch just a few moments ago, and he told me about a wave of migration. Security, surely migration is direct security threat as well to EU and many member states. We agreed that our role is to provide assistance to places needing assistance, so providing help, assistance in the ground, so to variety of countries of Africa, the place of origin of migration waves. And yet, I think that due to COVID-19, due to many conflicts, due to lack of governance, we are not able to provide this successfully. In terms of EU territory, it is the matter of now, and we know it after COVID-19, the matter of country resilience. So building this resilience within the EU and in neighboring countries is extremely important for us, and we have to look in this process with enormous care. By the way, our political group was always in favor of very close transatlantic relationship, and therefore we are for the next trade agreement between EU and US. I think that it is very important to have this relationship with our alliance rather than countries that are questionable in terms of intentions vis-a-vis Western world. But we have also to think not only about productivity, but of sustainable development of agriculture. I agree that choice is very important. We have to give our citizens choice in terms of using small-scale ecological produce of local farmers, and of course what is available as kind of luxury produce from all over the world. Yet, in terms of current knowledge about infections, about disturbances in trade, necessities to shorter the supply chains, we have to be very vigilant also to what extent we open to let's say, exotic deliveries of foodstuffs. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Anna, as always. Fascinating to hear the geopolitical and international view that you have so much expertise in. Now, we've got very few minutes left, and questions are streaming in. So if I may, could I turn to the Commissioner and ask questions coming from a journalist. Will the EU reconsider its position on precision breeding of plants? Is the EU at risk of losing a competitive advantage if it continues to refuse using new technologies in farming? I guess that's a kind of GMO question, but would you like to take that, Commissioner?
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Answering for this question, that each decision should be based on the scientific evidence about the new technologies we should to know the impact of these technologies for the environment, for the health, public health, etc. That this is not my direct responsibility. This is the responsibility of the commissioner responsible for health. My colleague Kyriakides, maybe it should be the question addressed for her. But generally, the Commission position is that all the new technologies, we have generally positive approach for this, but every decision should be taken on the base scientific evidence. But let's me to comment some the previous discussion and some reflections previous speakers, and I like to declare very clear that the food security is absolutely the main priority. This is the main objective of the common agricultural policy defined by the treaty. We are obliged to ensure that the food security for European citizens, but to have a food security connected with economic security of farmers, and also the competitiveness of farmers, incomes of farmers is also very important. I like to repeat that biodiversity strategy and farm to fork strategy will be monitored about the impact implementation of the targets of the strategies for the food security, incomes of farmers, and the competitiveness of farmers. The next question, that we say agriculture, but we should remember that we have big differences between types of agriculture. There are big differences between European model of agriculture generally and US model. That in US we have the big farms, 100 hectares, and in European Union the average size of the farm is 16 hectares. But there are also big differences between the member states. We have the member states in which the average size is more than 100 hectares, so 90 hectares, like in UK, that's before the Brexit, and like in Cyprus is 3 hectares only the farm. But it is interesting that productivity in small farms in Cyprus, when the average size of farm is 3 hectares, is 3 times more from 1 hectare than in UK, when the average size of the farm is 90 hectares. That it is not true that sometimes there is a shared opinion that small farms are less productive. It's absolutely not. There is no direct link that size of farms determines the productivity. And our ambition is to compete in the world market, not in quantity of food production, but first of all by the quality. This is the chance for small, especially for the small farmers. We have a lot of small farms. This is very important to maintain them, to avoid the depopulation of the rural areas. And of course, freedom of choice is absolutely very important, but this is also the freedom of choice to have possibility to have access to the high quality food, to the healthy food produced in small farms, produced in the for the local market. And the last remark, that last reflection, that protectionism, and to reduce needs of imports. It's not the protectionism. Of course, we need a lot of feed for our livestock from US, for example. But it is not, you know, that this is not the controversy that with the trade and to improve the own production of protein crops, for example. This is also the ambition of in the Green Deal, in the Farm to Fork strategy. But this is not the protectionism. Don't.
So can I just interrupt you there, because I know the secretary has to go. He has a hard deadline at 5, and I just wanted to give the secretary a chance for.
Thank you again. Very interesting.
Final remark, please, secretary. Can you hear me, secretary? So
any question, Richard?
Yeah, sorry. So I just wanted to give you, because I know you have to go, but I just wanted to give you a chance to make any final remarks. There's a number of questions that have come in from you, particularly from a journalist called Michael Scaturo in the US. If there's any talk in the Trump administration of a plant-based protein subsidy program and a carbon-neutral farming program similar to what the EU is proposing in Farm to Fork.
Well, again, I think this is the untold story, I think, over carbon sequestration. Honestly, when you look at comparatively over no-till situations here in the U.S., the carbon capture in no-till situations, which is significantly higher in the United States of adoption than it is in the EU. When you continue to turn the soil over, that's when you have carbon CO2 emissions in your soil. We've got over 30% of our farmers adopting no-till or limited till, which captures soil carbon in the soil and makes it more productive. As I gave the goals that we have, our goal is to go even further than that, get to from 30% up to 90% of no-till types of things. The tools that the farm to fork are eliminating is what enables us to do that, which I would submit is more environmentally friendly.
Excellent. Thank you so much to you, Secretary, for being with us. I know you have to go. We're going to continue for a few more minutes.
Can I say one last thing?
Yeah, I just want to say a few final last comments.
I would, and I've issued an invitation to the commissioner, but I would love for all of you ECR members and your colleagues, when this COVID situation is secure, we would invite you to come to the U.S. and let me show you what U.S. farming is all about.
Just try to stop us. Thank you so much. Commissioner, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Was there anything else you wanted to finish off with any final remarks?
No, generally I said that before, and yeah, that when the ambition of the European Union, that the Green Deal in agriculture is to improve the sustainability of agriculture, to maintain the productivity of the European agriculture, but not only for today, but for future generations. This is very important. This is long-term vision of development of the European agriculture, of the rural areas. I fully agree that with Mr. Secretary Perdue that we should, to discussing about the agriculture, we should take into account all aspects, the productivity, the social aspects, the environmental aspects, but the farm to fork strategy, biodiversity strategy, is taking into account all of these aspects.
Thank you, Commissioner. Now, we have come to the end of our time, but I've got the figures in front of me. There are an awful lot of people still watching online. So I'd like to give each of the panel members just a quick 2 minutes intervention if they want any closing thoughts based on the enormous amount of information and things that have been talked about this afternoon. But John, perhaps maybe you'd like to add something?
Yeah, I want to underscore the importance of Europe embracing modern technology. Really, that's what it comes down to. There was some tiptoeing in the organic community towards recognizing that gene editing, which is very similar to the random mutations that exist in crop development, could provide an avenue to reopen the discussion about the role of biotechnology in agriculture, but they were slapped down by the ideological organic establishment, even though many of the members are younger and I think are wiser and don't see this in ideological anti-capitalist perspective. They see it as a productivity and a sustainability view. So I think we have to get beyond the idea that we see agriculture in silos. There is not an organic movement and a GMO or biotechnology movement in conventional agriculture. There is a sustainability movement. It is one of those words that mean nothing and everything, so we have to be careful in how we use it. But at the same time, the goals are the same. I interact with farmers all over the United States and in many parts of the world, particularly in hard-pressed countries, Africa, Latin America, and the goal is the same. How do we reduce inputs, but how do we balance out the risks and rewards? It makes no sense to dramatically reduce pesticides, most of which are safe, and the toxic content of these pesticides has gone down dramatically since the 1960s and even more significantly since the early 2000s, and throw out what is a significant tool, not only to increase productivity, but to increase biodiversity, to preserve beneficial insects. These are targeted chemicals. So I think we need a non-ideological approach, reorient the goal towards sustainability, and not endorse one kind of methodology farming technique over another.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. If I could turn quickly to Anna, any closing thoughts just for a minute?
Yeah, thank you, Richard. Everything indicates that the current crisis we are in, pandemics of COVID-19, was not intended as intentional. So it just happened, of course, with many mistakes of societies, but still we have to cope with this, and we cannot exclude further disasters of this kind in during time to come. We still eventually await the second wave. So thinking about food security is extremely important also in the European Union, in European territory, or in Europe, taking this broader, because we always think about our neighbors, being it the Eastern Partnership or Western Balkans, or even farther south. Therefore, we have to think about maintaining resilience of member states to this kind of disasters, in particular by providing available, economically, physically available healthy food for all our citizens. We passed successfully this exam during first stage of pandemics, hopefully with policies that we introduce within EU, also by individual member states, we are able to build successfully food security on our territory and provide also food to our other areas, like for example, Africa.
Splendid. Thank you, Anna. Can I turn to Herman quickly? Can you give us 1 minute?
Very quick. The main idea is we have to reduce the obstacles for innovation in Europe and not add continuously more of them. The current application of the precautionary principle is fully disproportionate. A rational precautionary principle is welcome, but this current approach to the principle is the fear of a risk, or the risk of a risk, that brings us really to blocking. There's a broad consensus about the urgent need to bring innovation in plant breeding to farmers, for example. And the last thing, I mean, the fight for economic viability of farmers is the main issue in Europe. If it doesn't exist, we will have desertification in Spain and otherwhere, and we will have the countryside empty. It won't be Greta Thunberg who is going to solve this thing. We need our farmers where they are on the farms, producing in a way they can earn their lives there on the soil, in a decent productivity, with productivity, and in a very viable and sustainable way. And the farmers, we need them in the agriculture. Everything else is theological stories we can do in commissions far away from the countryside.
What a great way to end. Thank you so much, Herman. Well, we have come to the end, and I would like to extend a huge vote of thanks to all of our panelists. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you very much.
Sorry. Just for all of our viewers, this discussion is recorded. It's on our website. And should you wish to review over the comments, please go to our website at ecrparty.eu. You will also see there that we do these regular webinars. There will be details coming up for our programme for the autumn. So please keep an eye on what's going on there. Other than that, just once again, a big thank you to all of you. I wish you all a very pleasant afternoon. Stay safe, and I hope to hear you here again soon. Thank you very much.